above. Everything changes through the lens of love. Oh, come alive through the lens of love.
Praise be to God, the Lord led you here today. Welcome to Through the Lens of Love. I'm your host, Helen Eimers, inner healing and success coach, and a woman on an everlasting journey toward interior freedom. This is a space where we open the door to see ourselves, the world, our circumstances, and our work through the lens of love, where we get to ask, what if you could see yourself, your life, your relationship, the way God sees you? That's the invitation of this podcast every single episode. And today on the podcast, I want to share a little concept that I've learned along the way that will change your life and your thoughts in the best way. What if both could be true? Let me just share something with you. I am a little hard-headed. You could ask my husband, you could ask anyone who has known me for a long time. I have ideas and I really like my ideas. And for most of my life, that was a level of control for me, right? I was like stuck in my ways. This is the way we're going to do it. This is what makes sense in my brain, right? Like I wasn't able to consider a lot of other options. And I always liked things a certain way. Insert perfectionism, insert level of control that feels safe. And like I saw this trend so much growing up, like looking back. Even when I was playing sports or in school, and I see this in my kids, right? Our kids are incredible students, but when they don't know something, they get really hard on themselves and they get angry, right? Like they right away are like, I should know this, right? But what if both could be true? So I saw this parallel in myself as I reflected and created the content for this podcast episode. I was like, oh my goodness, this has happened all my life. And I can imagine that you can see or will be able to see or feel parallels to your life as well, as I give some examples. And so here was a pattern I was in, is like everything has to be a certain way. And I like to say that I got into nursing because I'm like, I wanted to know what to do in certain situations and circumstances. And so, yes, I went to nursing school and yes, I learned all the textbook stuff. And then they throw you into being a nurse and like a lot of that doesn't apply, right? Like your patient doesn't have the same symptoms as the textbook says, and it may not be textbook. And so I struggled with that a lot. I was like, oh, there's a lot of gray area here. And those critical thinking skills really had to shine through, and I had to work on that. And I love the word "and" because what we do is we say, well, I can't be a good mom. I can either be a good mom or I can be a good businesswoman. But like, let's take that word "or" out. Let's insert the word "and" because both could be true. And I'm going to keep sharing how this concept has applied to my life throughout all of the work that I've done. So here was a pattern that may sound familiar to you in your life as well. I was young. I had a vision. I was going to get the nursing degree. I got my nursing degree by the time I was 20. I got married when I was 20. We built a home when I was 20 and I got the job. And then what next was the baby. And that didn't happen again. Infertility, my story of infertility is a whole nother session episode that I will record in the future for you all. And I couldn't control that. And that was the pattern, is like, it has to be this way because this is the way that I have conceptualized it in my brain. And so it had to be to perfection on my term, no plan B, figuratively or literally, like was ever considered. It's like, this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to be. And there was very much a lack of trust in myself and God, very much a lack of surrender in the plan and to God, and very much a lack of faith because I had this level of control, and that level of control made me feel very safe. A prime example I love to give is mothers who are just really burnt out. And I have a lot of friends most of my friends are moms, and they're like, oh my gosh, and then I'm folding the clothes and then I'm doing dishes. And I was like, why aren't your kids doing that? And they're like, oh, well, they don't fold the towels right. And I was like, oh, okay. So let's not complain about doing all the laundry if you're not willing to let go of that control. So that's just a prime example of how this can show up in our everyday lives. It can be something as simple as that, or it can be something as big as, this is when I'm supposed to have a baby. I should have been pregnant by now. And it was out of my control. Truly, it was. And so that was such control that I was holding on to without realizing that I had a choice of how I was going to think about it. And so one time I am sending a voice memo to my coach. I am frustrated. I am in a season of burnout. I'm in a season of fear, right? Like, this isn't working. Nothing is working. I can't go on. I think I should just quit. And there was so much fear behind that. And I was making a perceived lack of success mean something about my worth, right? And my coach, bless her heart, she's like, well, what if both could be true? And I remember her saying something. She was coaching me. And she was saying, well, have you ever considered this? And have you ever considered this? And I went back at her and I said, what you're telling me, what you're saying is like backwards from everything I've ever shared with people, everything that I've coached people on, the whole concept that my business is built on. And she came back and said, well, what if both could be true? And sometimes, many times, we've never even considered that in our lives because we create a thought, we have a thought. All of these thoughts are internal based on our situations, based on our circumstances. Maybe someone said something and you took that thought to heart and you started believing it. There's lots of ways that thoughts come into our lives, but ultimately they are ours. And when we know that we have that ability to shift our thoughts and to question them out of love, through the lens of love, this is the important part, because we can say why, and we can say, why are you thinking that? You're a terrible person. That's not helpful. We can say, oh, that's such an interesting thought. One of my favorite phrases is, whether I have a thought that's not serving me or someone else says something maybe that's hurtful or it doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, that's an interesting thought. And that helps me shift my whole mood. That helps me shift it versus like, and I'm sure you've heard this and I'm just going to say it, but I hear so many people judging others. They're like, they're an idiot. They're such an idiot. And I'm like, they're also human and they are also a child of God. And you are calling a child of God an idiot. And no matter what someone does, let's be kind. What if you just said, they have an interesting thought? Oh, they think differently than me, right? And same thing to yourself. Are you telling yourself like, oh, you're such an idiot. You're not very smart at all. Or are you saying, oh, that was an interesting thought. Let's take a look at where that came from. So here are some examples where both could be true. And these are all like spaces in my past that I came back to as I was preparing to share this with you all. Okay, so I loved volleyball when I was younger, but I had a temper. I would get very angry at myself. So if I shanked the ball, my thought was, oh, you're awful. You're terrible. Like, you shouldn't be playing. You need to practice more. But what if when I shanked the ball, I could also know that I was still worthy? Because actually both are true. But when I would mess up, I would make it mean something about me. I would just like, that was it. That is it. And this is what we do in our lives. We create this finality to things. And one of the sticky notes I have here on my computer is there is no final version or your life or business, and both can be true. You can shank the volleyball and still be worthy. Another example is if someone says something mean to you, if someone says something that's unkind to you, it is still true that you are worthy of love. Both can be true. You can prove that she or he said XYZ to you. That is a situation, that is a circumstance, and you are still worthy of love. But what we tend to focus on is the situation, the circumstance that happens, and we make it mean something about us. And we believe that. And it's like, gold, that is it. Like that is what we have decided. And what if we just opened the door to say, and this is also true. They said this, and this is also true. There were times in my life, in my childhood, where I was mean to others. Still, I am a sinner. right? Sometimes I say things that maybe are inappropriate or that are hurtful, that of course I didn't mean to hurt someone intentionally, but I say things. And the truth is that if I was mean to someone or if I said something, I am still forgiven. What if both could be true? Because they are. So I want you to just open the door of like, what if both could be true? And when it comes to the pregnancy, I couldn't get pregnant when I wanted. What if I would have in that moment believed, yes, I'm not getting pregnant, but my body is still a gift? I did not believe that in the slightest in that phase of infertility. I thought there was something wrong with me. I was sad. I was depressed. I was angry. I was so angry at myself, at my body, at God, at other people. Like I had such blinders on. Like two things could not be true here. The only truth was that I was failing and that I couldn't get pregnant. And I just like laser focused in on that. So I want you to just open your eyes through the lens of love and say, what else is true here? Right? And also, is your thought really true? One of my favorite books is by Byron. It's called Loving What Is. And she shares this little fun test that you get to do, right? It's like, if you have a thought, you get to ask it, or you get to ask the thought, ask yourself, like, is that true? And of course, because your brain wants to be right, you say, oh yeah, that's true. Of course it is. And then the second question is it really true? I have people tell me all the time, like, so-and-so hates me. And I was like, did they say that? Well, no, but this is how they're treating me. Okay, that's interesting that you developed a thought that they hate you. They never actually said that. Now, the fact is that they said this or that they did this. And what could you do to set yourself free? You could either have a conversation with them out of love, or you could say, oh, that's so interesting that she said that. Period. Done. End of story. Set yourself free, my love. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Through the Lens of Love. I am passionate about sharing what helps me activate each day in my life and my faith. In honor of that, I want to highlight this episode's sponsor, Pink Salt Riot. I was introduced to this company at the Encounter Ministries conference and felt an instant connection with Ashley, who is at the helm of this woman-owned Christian company. The mission of Pink Salt Riot is to create wearable daily reminders of the truth. I am in love with their truth bands. It's a flat band that's stretchy, cloth-like material that you wear on your wrist with beautiful designs on the outside and a mix of scripture and affirmations on the inside. They have kids, women's, men's sizes, and I grabbed one for each member of my family and was sure to stock up to have plenty on hand to give as the perfect gift. In their online store, Pink Salt Riot also has jewelry, stationery, stickers, and so much more. Every item is meant to anchor you back to who God says you are, especially when the lies get loud. As a way to share this light with you all, head on over to pinksaltriot.com and use the code LensOfLove10 at checkout for a 10% discount. And now, let's get back to the show. And so this came up at the retreat this year, at the Amplify retreat. And I love hosting retreats. I love the women there know. Like I have these retreats so beautifully planned, not only with what I'm sharing, but also lots of time to just explore and have what's supposed to come up. And so in this retreat moment, one of the women, just like this aha moment, she said something and she was like, well, I can't do this and be successful here. Like, it's just like proven that I can't. And I just said, well, what if both could be true? And it was like this aha moment. And that was literally, truly like it was like the theme of the retreat switched. And it was so beautiful. And just this week, I was working with a woman and we were doing an inner healing session. And her thought, she was having all this nervousness and this anxiety. And I said, well, what are you telling yourself? What's your body telling yourself? Where's that anxiety and that nervousness coming from? And she said, well, my thought is I can't do this. I said, oh, okay. Where'd that thought come from? You want to know what she said? I'm going to tell you. She said, I made it up. You guys, we make up thoughts all the time based on what happens, based on our experience, based on what we do. If you are not questioning your thoughts out of love, if you are not putting on the heart-shaped glasses through the lens of love to view your thoughts, to question them, to ask higher quality questions, you are doing yourself a disservice and you are staying stuck. You are keeping yourself in victim mentality. You are keeping yourself in only this lane. And when you do that, you block the ability to really connect fully with joy and peace and inner capacity and hearing the word of God. And so, what if something else is true right alongside of something good or something hard? An example I love of this is the movie You Can Only Imagine 2. Have you seen it? I love it. I love, love, love this movie. And they talk about holding grief and gratitude at the same time. You can be going through grief, and that is true. And you can also be thankful, and that is true as well. And so if you haven't watched that movie, go check it out. If you haven't read the book Loving What Is by Byron Katie, go check that out. And I'm so excited to be sharing with you a guest who's coming on the podcast next week, Sarah. And she talks about how she was checking every box and still feeling empty inside. And this conversation is going to wreck you in the best way. And she shares how this concept of like, she was just in the zone. She was done. She had decided like, I am done. I need to run away. I can't do this anymore. And what opened her heart in the most beautiful way was, what if both can be true? What if I can be grieving the loss of what I'm experiencing in my life and I can keep putting one foot in front of the other? And what if I feel like I'm done and exhausted and I can open my heart to see myself through the lens of love? So if you've read all the books and you have done the work and you have a sense of like, oh, I just want to feel that joy and that peace and that happiness and hear God's voice, and something still feels disconnected, you do not want to miss the episode with Sarah next week, because she's going to be sharing that. She read all the personal development books, or a lot of them, she shares. She is a doctor. She had a great awareness, right? Like she's like, I know something is off, and how do I get that spark back? And we're going to talk about this concept of what if both can be true. And so in the meantime, I encourage you to challenge yourself, to ask yourself, to number one, question your thoughts out of love. Not, hey, you're an idiot. Why are you thinking this? Because we all have unintentional thoughts. There are thoughts that I have that I'm like, that's interesting. Whereas before, I used to say, that's not nice. You're an idiot. You shouldn't think that, right? That's the back talk that's going to keep you stuck exactly where you are. So when you have a thought that maybe doesn't connect with you or doesn't feel good in your body, say, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And start saying it to other people too. It's a beautiful release of freedom for yourself. So I challenge you to question your thoughts out of love, see them out of love, and say, did I just make this up? I will never forget my very first therapy session. And I said, oh, I'm hard to live with. And my therapist says, well, who said that? And I'm like, oh, well, I do this and I do this and I do this. And I'm sure my husband has said this before, right? But she challenged my thought, and I had never had anyone do that before. So thank you. Thank you. And I want you to just support yourself today. When you have a thought, when you hear someone say something else, oh, that's so interesting. What else is true here? And you open the door to so many possibilities. So until next time, I encourage you to continue to see yourself, your relationships, and your thoughts through the lens of love. The Lord brought you to this episode for a reason today. If you felt seen, that was meant for you. And if something stirred that you've been safely tucking away, don't let it go back into hiding. Bookmark this episode, re-listen, or share it with a woman who needs it. The ripple effect of shifting yourself and then sharing with others, that's why we were created. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and come find me at helenimers.com. Until next time, keep seeing the world through the lens of love.
Oh, come alive through the